Hey guys, Mr. Blade here. So this video is gonna be our quick little commentary video, thoughts and impressions video on my final thoughts on what is he even drinking, guys? Do you guys see that? He was drinking air. Bro was straight up drinking air, bro. That way didn't give bro enough budget, so he had to drink air. That is a little bit silly. But in any case, as I was saying, this is gonna be our final Mortenax Blade video because we have basically done him in every single DPS, every single endgame content, every single rotation, every single possible permutations that you could actually run with Mortenax Blade. Okay, look at that. Oh, so now you had the there's the cup. So it glitched out. That's very interesting. Just a quick little summary. I would say as of this very moment, if you are gonna be pulling for Mortenax Blade, there basically falls into three different groups of people. Group number one, Acheron mains. I think without a shadow of a doubt, if you're gonna be an Acheron main, Mortenax Blade for one cost is an insane quality of life upgrade. So please go ahead and get yourself the Mortenax Blade. Fantastic. Blade, or rather group number two, the Asheville Blade mains. This group of people is gonna be in a little bit more of a less common topic, because I believe majority of a version 4 players, they probably went for the Elation flagship, in which case you would have skipped Asheville anyways. But for the very small group of people that put for both Blade and Asheville, I think this is gonna be a very nice investment as well, because what they are essentially lacking at this point in time is a proper main DPS, not Acheron. Because Acheron at the end of the day is basically what Jingyuan was before Aglea, and Sunday is Blade. If you can think about it that way. I'm basically saying that in the future versions, I feel there will most likely be a way more synergistic main DPS specifically for Blade as well as Azure, and who knows, maybe even as a state, to form the brand new structure of another team taking place in HSR aside from the Elation slop that we have in version 4. I'm not sure if it's going to be Himeko Nova, I'm not sure if it's going to be other units at IPC, but that is going to be the second group of people that I would say will give you a lot of value if you're going to be pulling for Blade. Now the third group of people pulling for Blade, and I think majority of chatters and Brightwind enjoyers, y'all probably belong to the third group of people. You are pulling Blade because he is the definition of a wheelchair unit, right? He is essentially what allows you to bring majority of all existing DPS into a much higher caliber of performance without really doing a proper team building technique, because the only team building you need is Blade, Tribi, Hyacinth. Boom, done. And I think a lot of people generally would have also put themselves an E1 Tribi, making the wheelchair of version 3 plus a wheelchair of version 4 a very satisfying results for a lot of different endgame, especially if you are going to be stuck with all of the older version 1 DPS like your Jingliu, right? Like your okay, I don't even know what the fuck this is. Your Tobes, which even got a 5 cycle clear, right? To be fair, it's not really an E0, but it is what it is. So for this group of people that you are pulling Blade for specifically in the wheelchair department, right? I think there's nothing wrong with pulling for wheelchair, but don't break the bank pulling for wheelchair. I think that is gonna be the most fair statement. If you already have, okay, for example, right, if my free-to-play account has 500 limited pulls, if I wanted to pull for an E0 S0 wheelchair Blade to add to my roster for one cost, the opportunity cost is not that high for me, because worst comes to worst, I go hard pity. I still have 340 pulls left, which is still gonna be enough for me to secure 2 hard pities by the next version update. But if you're gonna be in a situation where you pull for Mortenax Blade, but you do not have enough pulls left in the future versions, I think what is most likely gonna happen is that you will feel your position to be very awkward, because you neither have enough Stellar Jades to pull for Blade's actual best in slot DPS, and that is definitely not Asheville. Even though Asheville right now is his best performance, both of them are gonna be considered sub DPS. So I think that in the future, when Mortenax Blade and Asheville's main DPS comes out, if you went for this route, you will either lack Asheville or you'll lack that set main DPS. which is gonna be putting your account in a very weird situation where you could have otherwise invested this cost in Mortenax Blade for another archetype that you might have already been investing halfway. Best example, right? I think the best example is you pull for Remembrance Flagship, and then you pull for Elation Flagship, right? So you have one Remembrance Flagship, one Elation Flagship. You are probably someone that has an E1 tribute left behind because you pull for Celebrating Your Remembrance, so you have a homeless E1 tribute, right? So for this particular situation, right after pulling for Elation Flagship, you have like one cost, maybe half a cost. Then Blade came out, and then you see all of the glazing that Mortenax Blade has received for the past like 3-4 days. Everyone is saying he's a Prywin literally says he is a god. He is the strongest unit in the entirety of HSR. So you might be thinking, okay, you know what? I might as well just pull Mortenax Blades right now because my 3B is homeless. I already have two very, very good teams. I might as well just pull for this wheelchair unit as of this moment to make my team tree a lot stronger. Which, like I mentioned at the start just now, it's okay if you don't break the bank for it. But if you're using your last few pulls just for this wheelchair team tree, you are essentially putting your team tree in a predicament where you have to keep playing wheelchair for that team tree. So if in the future, another better team comes out, all those costs you have invested into a wheelchair team tree is gonna be quote unquote like wasted because you could have otherwise just invested in that set brand new team building experience. So if I was a free-to-play account, right, I think I really like to relate this with Bob. Even though Bob's luck is a little bit unrelatable, he is also in a very similar situation with a lot of players in which I don't really have a proper team tree. Right, I have a Remembrance Flagship, I have a E1 Archer, which is like moderately invested. I'm going to invest more cost into E1 Archer for sure, but my team tree is like D Herda, right? It's like E0 D Herda, E0 Maide, and like E0 Anaxa, right? So if I were to pull for an M Blade for my team tree on my free-to-play account, it will definitely make my performance a lot more considerable because I can then use my Blade with my E1 Tribi, which is also low-key homeless because previously it was Tribi with D Herda team, right? But if my free-to-play account pulled for the M Blade, it will make my team tree that much stronger without committing for a brand new DPS. But the reason why my free-to-play account is not going for this path is because I'm not option A, right? I'm not an Aircron main. Bob does not have Aircron, so I don't really need Blade for Aircron. And I'm also not option B because Bob is not someone that owns Blade and Asheville, and he doesn't really have any intention to follow down this path. So Bob is way more interested in saving up his costs for a third team to commit at least bare minimum 4 to 6 costs right off the get-go. Whether that team is gonna be Himiko, whether Himiko wants Mortenax Blade, whether version 5 is gonna be creating another flagship, which they definitely will create another flagship, I feel like that will make a lot more sense cost-wise because I wouldn't be greedy and stupid enough to pull for a wheelchair sub-DPS just to mindlessly pull for a random DPS to pair up with that wheelchair sub-DPS, if I'm making sense, right? So those are gonna be my thought process on the pooling opinions of Mortenax Blade in this particular segment over here. For the next segment, I'm gonna assume that you already pulled for Mortenax Blade, right? So I already said whether you should be pulling, whether you should not be pulling, as my personal subjective opinion. When it comes to building Mortenax Blade, I frankly think if you don't want to worry about it all much, S0 tutorial is fantastic if you don't use DOT, max out all your tracers. Frankly, if you have a good enough Master Smith set, you are most likely going to be able to do enough damage because sometimes the deal with Ego 4-piece is you might waste your Ego 4-piece, which means you are going to be getting negative value. So I wouldn't really recommend running Ego 4-piece if you don't want to think about it, especially if you want to use AI. Just run Master Smith, and you're going to be getting everything done just purely from the AI play myself. The 2-piece, once again, is going to be the same. You can just go for the 2-piece bone for the highest amount of damage, and you don't have to worry about whether you want to get our field up as fast as possible. And frankly speaking, the only reason why we cannot get our field up so quickly is purely because we have been doing all of our testings against Night 1 with the energy debuff. If it was not for this specific depower debuff, you shouldn't really have a lot of issues getting your ultimate up in the first place. Alright, so 4-piece Master Smith into 2-piece bone for majority of players is gonna be very, very viable. If you do not want to farm the 4-piece Master Smith because you are not gonna be farming for IC, for Navigator, for like Himeko, whatever it's gonna be. You could also just give Blade your 4-piece diver, which is the debuffer set. That's also gonna be a very, very close substitute if you want to go down that path over there, right? And then for islands, I've also said it before, E1 into E2 is gonna be your best cost investment upgrade for Blade. Please get these two first before considering his signature weapon. So that is gonna be done so. But at the same time, this also kind of brings me back into my original point, which is, if you're gonna be pulling Blade for a wheelchair, right? You might think to yourself, I might as well just pull an E2 Blade for the ultimate wheelchair. Which you'll be right, he will be the ultimate wheelchair at E2 Blade. A little bit similar to how E1 Tribute was like the ultimate wheelchair for a lot of different teams back then. Except that this ultimate wheelchair only takes place at E2, compared to the E1 Tribute. If you were to use an E2 Blade, I am not certain if E2 Blade is going to end up being best slot in a team that you want to build in the future. So for example, if I build my E1 Tribute, alright, and E1 Tribute is like the wheelchair back then, I didn't know if E1 Tribute is still going to stay in either my Remembrance team or my D Herda team. Well, I mean, for now she's staying, but that role can also be replaced pretty quickly. At least for E1 Tribute, my intention of running her as a wheelchair, especially since I put her as a very mid-game portion for my free-to-play account, we invested 2 costs in the Tribute while skipping a Bubbin. Right, my free-to-play account does not have a Bubbin. But if you're going to be going for an E2 Blade for the wheelchair experience, you are essentially potentially sacrificing 3 costs that could have been a unit like E2 Final. Right? Or like back in those days, right? An E2 Final. Maybe an E2 Himeko, if Himeko is going to be a really, really strong E2. Or other future, potentially stronger E1 units plus an E0. Like for example, instead of going for like an E2 Tribute back then, you could have saved up for a E2 Cyrene. Or maybe an E1 Evernight plus a E0 Cyrene. Right? Something like that. Because keep in mind, for this 3 costs on M-Blade, you are essentially going to be sacrificing not just your support slot, the cost for supports, but also the cost of your sustain. Now, there has been this belief that Blade can essentially act as a pseudo-sustain by being a quote-unquote preservation unit, which she can. But if your sustain pressure is going to be too high, especially if you do not have any islands to make your team deal enough damage, or if you're not up against the clown enemies, which gives you 50% healing restore, then this sustainless is about as useful as sustainless build. You can sustain until they deal too much damage, or they have too much HP. And it is not a matter of if, but is when. Because HP inflation HSR are still very, very real. So enemies are just going to be coming like harder and harder to hit. So if you are not willing to commit for the sustainless run, I would not consider running him as your pure sustain unit. Unless you want to grind RNG, which you definitely could, but as a casual player, you're probably not going to be doing that, right? So that is pretty much going to be that for his island pooling investment. Last little segment before I wrap up everything right here. If you are going to be pooling Blade to build a team around, my guess, right? This is just purely just speculations at this point. My guess is that we do not have an alternative path to Elation for version 4. Himeko is going to be a version 4.4 erudition unit. I'm not sure if she's gonna be a D Herda support. I'm not sure if she's gonna be a erudition main DPS. But generally speaking, number one, I see that they are both fire. So that is quite interesting right there. And number two, I do see erudition units hitting pretty frequently as well. For example, the Herda, alright, if you pass your Alden, you get an extra turn. Next time, you get double scale, right? Survival energy cost is really, really low. Baby Herda, when she spins, she also gives you a lot of extra attacks. So erudition as a whole, while maybe not as frequent as compared to like Hunt, they still have some other mechanics that could give them more hits to Mortenax Blade. So for players looking into maybe potentially Himeko Nova, there might be a possibility of Mortenax Blade being one of her slots. You don't know that, right? Because by the time Himeko Nova skill is gonna come out, her early access and everything, it is gonna be what? Probably 2 weeks after Blade banner goes away. Because after Blade's banner, we're gonna be getting Final and Cyrene. So there really isn't like an overlap as to whether you can determine if Mortenax Blade is gonna be going into Himeko Nova. So for this group of people, it is very, very speculative. And if you do not want to gamble, I will just save a little bit of time, right? So for example, back in Elation, right? You didn't know what was Silver Wolf and Evanessa's kid gonna be. So you didn't know if you want to pull for Yao Guang or Sparksy. That was honestly the right call, especially the free trade, because now it is very, very clear that Yao Guang's role in Elation team is like almost irreplaceable because of the way that EMC is doing. And if they were to release another Elation support or whatever, you can just slot that in alongside with Yao Guang for your Elation main DPS. Then all you need left is basically like Elation sustain, and you're gonna be in a team, right? So if you don't know what the final team is gonna be for Himiko, I wouldn't preemptively pull Blade just for this 4.4 unit. And speaking of 4.4, there's also this 2 other unit that is gonna be Rin as well as Gilgamesh, right? I mean, doesn't really have anything to do with Mortenax Blade, because you wouldn't really run Mortenax Blade with Archer for now. I don't think you would run, I mean, you could, but like, I don't think it's gonna be a dedicated slot because you still need Sparkle for the skill points. If Rin is gonna end up as an Archer support and you slot that up with Archer, Rin, maybe Sparkle, that's gonna be great. You could consider running Mortenax Blade as like a sustainless, but again, I mentioned it's gonna be a very temporary thing. But for Gilgamesh is where I'm a little bit more interested to see how that is going to be cooking, because I have no idea what Gilgamesh is going to be capable. And nobody knows what they're going to be doing anyways, because nobody can look at leaks. But if they are going to be forming some kind of synergy in terms of maybe like additional hits, right? Maybe they do have Ultimates or whatever it's going to be, then Blade potentially could help out a little bit over there. But once again, for the 4.4 speculations, it's going to be purely based on like what you believe is probably going to be happening. I don't think there's going to be a rush to pull yourself a Blade right now, because you still need a safe cost for 4.5 and 4.6 to see what they are going to come out. You're always chasing the future unit when you're looking in the present anyways. So no unit is always going to look like, oh my god, I want this and this is the final unit I'll ever get, because there will always be newer units to entice you into pulling for them in that sense, right? So that is going to be that for my thoughts on how Blade is going to impact 4.4. One last thing before I go, generally speaking, if I were to give him an overall rating, I think he is a solid, as of this moment, right? I think as of this very moment in 4.3, I think Blade is going to be at a solid 9 out of 10 for a unit. I think we should do this more for reviews. A 9 out of 10 unit in terms of a sub DPS, main DPS support. You can pretty much throw him any end content for now and he can just get a job done. But in terms of like future prospects, I will be a little bit more reserved and I'll give him roughly like 7.5 to 8 out of 10 depending on the team that you're going to be building around Blade. So if you're going to be logging on to the team that can make use of Blade's kit, you can go for it. But I'm a individual that always believed in you never pull DPS for supports, right? You always pull support for DPS. So I'm a lot more conservative in that sense for pulling DPS just to make Mortenax Blade. Because what if you don't even like the way the DPS plays? Then I'm going to be end up with a Mortenax Blade that doesn't do anything. And then version 5 is going to happen. And then we're going to have another version 5 wheelchair. Because there's always going to be a wheelchair in every single fucking version, right? So that's pretty much going to be all I have. Let me know what you guys think in the thoughts and comments down below. No leakers, because I have no idea what the fuck are leakers. Word of the day is going to be version 5 is only 6 months away, guys. Do you know it's already in the first week of June? We are literally about slightly more than 6 months away before version 5, which is kind of crazy, right? Join Discord, use code BOKE for 10% off your subs. All the best for your guys' boost, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.